So I showed you how to do bind mounts, and now we're going to get into volumes. Okay, so this is the other way to mount in new files into this that can survive between runs of containers. The difference between bind mounts and volumes is that bind mounts are literally just files on your computer that you're exposing inside of the container, right? Just like what we showed you here. A volume is something that Docker manages for you. It's not exposed on the host, right? Docker just like, okay, you've created this new volume, this new file system, and I'll just keep it, right? And anytime that you ask for it, I will hand it back to you, right? So this is really useful for things like database, right? So you could have Mongo write to this volume, right? And then anytime that the Mongo container goes away and comes back, it'll just start reading and writing to the same volume. So you're basically telling Docker, hold on to these files, and the name of these files is, Mongo mount or something like that, right? Does that make sense? So let's go ahead and we'll make a new directory here, and we'll start a new project. So I'm out of this, and we'll call this one volumes. CD into volumes. And we're going to come over here into volumes, close all these because I don't need them, and close that. And here we're going to make a new file. This one's going to be called index.js. And we're going to make a new file here called Dockerfile. Surprise, surprise. And what we want to do is we want to create the worst database, where we're just going to use the file system basically as a database. That anytime someone hits an endpoint, what we're going to do is we're going to read the file, see how many things are in, or what the number is inside of the file, and then give it back to the user. So again, I wrote the node code for you, so you don't necessarily have to worry what it is. So come down here to volumes, and just copy all of this. You don't have to worry about anything in here. Oh, that's not a Docker file, that's an index.js. But just to walk you through it, FS stands for file system, path is a path resolution kind of module for Node. And we're saying, write to this data.txt file, okay? Oh, this isn't even a web server, right? So all this is going to do, it's going to run this on the container, and then it's going to exit the container. So all it's going to do is it's going to read from data.txt, which we're going to mount in via volume, right? And then it's going to add 1 to it, and then it's going to console log that, and then it's going to finish, right? So if this was just an ephemeral container, right, it would always be 1, right? Because it would just be run, okay, nothing's there, here's 1, exit, right? But I want it to maintain state, right? So I want it to be 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, right? So we're going to use a volume to accomplish that. Does that make sense? Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open our, we're going to make the simplest Docker file in the world here, which is from node 12-alpine. Doesn't matter, you can do stretch or whatever you want. We're going to say copy --chown, not from, chown, node, and dot to /source. I'm going to say workdir /source, and the command will be node index.js. Nothing new here, right? Pretty simple little Docker file. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to say docker build -- tag equals incrementer dot built. Awesome. Docker run incrementer. So there it says file not found, writing 0 to new file. Now if I run this again, what do you think will happen?
It'll read it and 1.
So it's going to still stay 0 because we haven't mounted the volume in yet, right? So we keep running it. It's going to say, I can't find anything called data.txt. Here you go, right? But what we can do now is we can use docker run. And if you remember inside of our index.txt, let's make this a bit smaller for a second. we have the data path here, right? So this is how you read out environmental variables inside of Node. So I can modify this to be inside of a volume somewhere, right? So I'm going to say docker run dash dash, not there, dash dash env, right? So this is how I'm going to feed environmental variables into the container. Data path equals /data/num.txt. Okay. Then I'm going to say dash dash mount type equals volume, source equals, just make something up. I'm going to call this incrementer data. As long as you're consistent, you can call it whatever you want. And then target, we're going to store that in /data, right? So that's where the actual volume is going to be mounted in, right? And then I'm going to say incrementer, right? So I'm actually going to run the container. Oh, so I actually already I was running this demo earlier, but you can say docker volume list. God, I have a lot, don't I? Docker volume rm incrementer data. I think that should remove it. Okay, so now if I run it, I must have gotten the wrong one. Let's do docker volume prune. That'll get rid of all of my volumes. Geez, what did I claim? Well, I just got a gigabyte back, so that's neat. All right, so now if I run this, it's going to say 5. I don't even know where this is anymore. So let's just call this incrementer data 2. So this will start a different one, and now it's saying writing 0 to a new file. And now if I run it again, it's going to say 0, 1, because it console logs it and then increments it, right? That's why it says that. But that's how we're getting persistent state between runs, right? And so this is all volumes of data that Docker is going to manage for you, right? So this isn't exposed to my host. I think you can like inspect it via the host, right? But it's not meant to, right? It's meant to be just for Docker containers. So that's kind of your rule of thumb. If you have information that's really just for the containers, right, and it's never meant for the host, use volumes. Always prefer volumes over bind mounts. It's almost always a better idea to use volumes. The only reason to use bind mounts is if you specifically want some sort of host container interaction, like a dev container or like somewhere like the Nginx one that we used, right? That's where a bind mount's more applicable, where it's about that kind of communication between the host and the Docker container. Again, the primary use case here is you'll see it with logs, right? So you'll have people like writing out their logs to a volume. That's a very common use case for that. You'll see it for databases where people are keeping their database state, right, written out to volumes. There's various different ways that you can see that manifest. So the last 3 or 2 that we're not going to talk about, but there are 2 other types of mounts. One of them is called tempfs, which, as the name belies, it's a temporary file system, right? So this is actually a Linux feature, so this only applies to Linux containers. You can actually like mount in like a temporary file system that then disappears at the end of it. And the reason that you would do this, that people like it, is they'll do it for like their secrets, right? So if I have like access password and I have like a database connection string or analytics key or something like that, I'll mount that in via tempfs, which is like this ephemeral Linux kernel feature of temporary mounting file system. So that's tempfs. You'll see that for secrets almost exclusively. And then there's another one called named pipes or npipe. I guess I haven't talked about it. There's Windows containers as well, right? So we've been doing everything on Linux containers, but there are also Windows containers. They work differently. Windows containers are actually full Windows virtualized operating systems, right? But you're just allowed to treat them like containers. So if you have like a whole data center and it's managed by Kubernetes and they're all using containers everywhere, you can use Docker to manage Windows as well. And so there is a special file system for that called named pipes, which you can use for various other things with Windows containers. I've actually never even used Windows containers, so I'm not going to explain any more than that. But they're out there, they exist, you can use them if you want to. All right, does anyone have any questions about volumes or bind mounts, either one? Makes sense?
You said one of the main use cases would be like a shared database or something that's external. Would you have a use case where you would maybe want different containers hitting the same volume to get like a shared mock data between different instances running?
I could see that. I mean, that's another thing that volumes are quite useful for, is like if I have container A and container B, and they're both reading from the same data set, a volume can be shared amongst both of those, and so you can mount those both in. Like a dumb example I could think about that is if let's say I have 5 different web services and they're all running, and they're all logging out, and I want the logs to go to one place, I can mount the same logging volume into all 5 of them, right? And that would be a good way to accomplish that. But yeah, I could definitely see that. Or like maybe you have one service that's that's writing logs to a mounted volume, and then you have like a log analytics service, right? And that would be reading from that and like, you know, displaying a nice dashboard or something like that. So yeah, totally valid use case for that kind of stuff, and a good reason to use volumes.